First, U.S. forces shot down an Iranian drone yesterday approaching the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea near Iran yesterday. The U.S. Central Command writing, quote, "The Iranian drone continued to fly toward the ship despite de-escalatory measures taken by U.S. forces operating in international waters." An F-35 fighter jet from Abraham Lincoln shot down the Iranian drone in self-defense and to protect the aircraft carrier and the personnel on board. This coming just days before Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are set to meet with the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on Friday. Here's the president at the White House yesterday. Watch this.
On Iran, are the negotiations still happening this week?
Yeah.
Where will they be? And what do you need to hear from Iran?
They're all over, but they are negotiating. They'd like to do something, and we'll see if something is going to be done. They had a chance to do something a while ago, and it didn't work out, and we did Midnight Hammer. I don't think they want that happening again, but they would like to negotiate. We are negotiating with them right now, yes.
Joining me now live from Brussels is U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. Ambassador, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here. What's your reaction to this, the U.S. needing to shoot down that aircraft?
Well, obviously, it is concerning. However, our multi-domain awareness and counter-drone systems on our ships are very good. And so, while there was no threat to the ship, I think these are the types of provocative actions that Iran should avoid, especially as we try to negotiate a resolution to the situation. But, President Trump is not going to be eternally patient with the Iranians. He mentioned in that clip that they already had one chance to abandon their nuclear ambitions, to stop killing the protesters that want freedom and democracy in Iran. So I think President Trump is willing to have this meeting at the end of the week, but at the same time, he has an armada sitting in the region ready to do whatever needs to be done to make sure that Iran does not ever possess a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, I don't understand why they would be provocative, why the provocations, knowing that the Armada is right there. Do you believe that President Trump is poised to do something bigger? A lot of the people in Iran want the president to intercept and take out the regime there.
Well, first of all, President Trump is certainly capable of doing anything that he wants to do, including a massive assault. But he is a principled peacemaker in chief. And so, he is going to be judicious about the use of any force. He's also going to be, very cautious when it comes to, regime change, because, we've seen in the past where, for example, Libya, when it descended into chaos, but at the same time, the precision operation he oversaw and executed in Venezuela was an absolute success. And so those are the things that we can do as the United States of America to bring pressure to bear. But again, it is all about Iran not having nuclear weapons, and at the same time also not killing protesters, which all reports suggest thousands, if not tens of thousands, of people died, in the last several weeks that protesting in Iran. So, President Trump, I think, has a clear handle on this, has red lines, and we'll see what negotiators can come up with.
Let me switch gears, get your take on Israel striking Gaza yesterday, saying that terrorists opened fire on IDF soldiers in the north of the Gaza Strip, causing retaliatory strikes. This after U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel yesterday to discuss these tensions with Iran before Friday's meeting. Netanyahu reportedly pushing the U.S. to remain strong in negotiations, insisting that Iran cannot be trusted to keep its commitments. Israel has now fully opened the Rafah crossing from Egypt into the Gaza Strip with new security protocols. Ambassador, where do we stand here?
Well, first of all, President Trump and his team, we're not going to just have words from Iran, guarantee any kind of deal. We're going to have concrete actions that really ultimately secure any deal. Israel has every right to protect itself, to make sure that Hamas cannot take a foothold and is punished any time that it shows up in Gaza. The people of Gaza have suffered a lot. They need to live peacefully, and Israel is along for that same ride. The problem is we have a terrorist organization backed by the Iranians that causes this chaos, and they're going to be stamped out everywhere that they pop up.
We, of course, have been talking a lot about the NATO countries increasing their defense spending. Where does that stand? Who are you still waiting for to meet the 5% target, Ambassador? We're going to be speaking with the foreign minister of Italy this morning, and I wanted to get your take on where the negotiations to increase spending on defense, buying those products through NATO from the United States ultimately.
Yeah, we've made tremendous progress. You know, we have a summit coming up this summer in Ankara where we're going to get our first report in a year into this. We've seen tremendous efforts. For example, the Polish are already at 5% spending. The Lithuanians, Latvians, Estonians, obviously not huge countries, but with huge hearts that are spending a lot of money, and they're all going to be meeting the 5% commitment. Germany is planning to hit that commitment in the next 4 years by 2029, which is an amazing from where they were, especially. But you know, we're still going to have some countries that need to step up. You know, and especially our friends that are further away from the eastern flank, further away from what the perceived Russia threat, are certainly not spending as fast. But you know, ultimately, it's about the capabilities. Are we ready to fight tonight? And do we have the modern weapons that are ready to show up and sustain the battle? And you know, we are constantly pushing our allies in that, and the United States is leading from the front. President Trump's proposed military budget of $1.5 trillion is well to completing our goal of getting to 5%. You know, the United States is the leader here in NATO. However, we need all of our allies to be equally capable, because that's what makes us all strong, and that strength is what's going to guarantee the peace. Maria.
Well, I mean, Ambassador, the president has proposed a $1.5 trillion budget for 2027. We've got to see if that gets through Congress, right?
Well, of course. I mean, Congress is going to have to appropriate that money. But in this modern world where we have challenges globally, you know, the United States is going to have to be capable and strong. And that I think the president's budget proposal is sound to make sure that we do have the strength.
Sure. And obviously, in a world where you've got these adversaries on the march, it becomes that much more critical. Ambassador, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much. We'll be watching your work, of course.
All right. Good to see you again.
Matthew Whitaker this morning.